For the most part, everything that the hosts are using, by the way, are freely available to anyone on LinkedIn. It's just that, like with any social platform, I think sometimes it's hard to tell what are the things that are high value and strategic and really going to move the needle for me, and where am I just, for lack of a better sort of way to think about it, like spending my time needlessly, right? We want to help hosts answer that question very succinctly. So one of the things that we have seen great traction with is with Hello Monday. I mean, you can look at Hello Monday, actually. Again, it goes back to like dog fooding so that we can best instruct others as like a best case model for what we think for the LinkedIn social approach. So first of all, on Monday morning when the show drops, I publish a newsletter using a newsletter tool that we have. Again, it's actually fairly easy to get an invite to use this tool. This tool has mostly rolled out to everybody, but in order to be able to access it, you need to be posting frequently enough on the platform. And by posting frequently enough, I mean you need to have posted once within the last month. It's not sort of over the top. And the newsletter allows us to embed an audio file. And so on Monday mornings, I send out my newsletter. I have built up a subscriber base over the last 3 years of close to 200,000 people who get a notification when my newsletter goes out. And inside that newsletter is embedded the megaphone file. LinkedIn does not support all audio embeds yet. It does support megaphone, and that is the one that we use for all of our LPN shows. And I post around that. And I also, on Wednesday afternoons, hold a live show using LinkedIn Live. Again, this is a tool that most people can get access to it's a fairly straightforward process. You apply and you're approved. And LinkedIn Live has been our game changer, because the thing that people who love the show want is presence with each other and with the host. I'm not going to tell you it's perfect, because what I actually want is to be sitting in a room with folks, right? And we don't have that ability yet, although we are sort of thinking about in the future, like what can we do with events. But what LinkedIn Live does for us is, myself and the producer, we literally turn on the camera for 30 minutes every Wednesday. About between 200 and 300 listeners tune in. There are about 50 who come every week. It's like a calendar appointment for them. It's 3 o'clock. That's lunchtime on the West Coast. So there are a whole bunch of people who just sit and have lunch with us. And we talk about the episode. And that has been extremely fruitful. And also, by cultivating our super fans, I think it's a great growth strategy and helps us to understand like where to take the show next.
So you send out the newsletter on the same day that you drop your podcast episode. And is there any other content in the newsletter apart from, hey, we just dropped this episode and here's a link to it?
There's usually a couple of paragraphs from me as the host saying, hey, this is why this one really matters. The host personality so drives the success of a podcast. And so, it's our position that listeners really want to hear from the host. But here's the trick with that. I try to get that audio file as high up in the newsletter as I can, because the more text that someone needs to get through before they get to that audio file, the less likely they listen to it and it converts to a download, which is very important to me. And then the other thing is, in that newsletter, I always tell people about office hours and give people the information to find office hours, which happens on Wednesday. And then I use the end of the newsletter to promote other things that I'm working on, maybe other shows in the LinkedIn Podcast Network, other things I want people to pay attention to. The post copy is really important for that newsletter. I've tried all kinds of different things. And what I have found is, that post will show up in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places. I usually interact with it on the desktop, but I'm just not most people on LinkedIn. Most people are using their cell phone, and they might be scrolling through their feed and they might only get like one line of that post, right? And they would have to click in order to get more. And so I always try to get my guest's name and a quote into the first line. So it'll be like, Matthew McConaughey on Freedom, quote, I love it. That, by the way, isn't a real, I just made it up. And then underneath that, skip a line underneath that, I, say, hey, on this week's episode of the Hello Monday podcast, you will come away knowing. Then I beat through 3 things. And then I say, please join the conversation in the comments, and I link to the show. And I have found that to be most successful, just as I track my own data. And by the way, as with many things in audio, you're going to want more data than you have from LinkedIn. And I don't get special data just because I work here. So a lot of this stuff is like figuring out like what metrics move the needle for me and tracking them in my own handy dandy Google spreadsheet that I made by myself. And so I watch and I notice that when I've tried a bunch of different formats, and that format was the format that I got the most conversions to read for my newsletter. And so I have stuck with it.